Hi everyone, welcome to Woolen Spinning. My name is Rachel and this is episode 171. I can't believe that we're already this high in episode numbers, but I just want to welcome you to this place and thank you to returning viewers. Thank you for continuing to watch the show week in, week out. Thank you for participating here on YouTube, leaving comments, commenting on the blog. And if you would like to learn more and you would like to support the show, please hit the subscribe button and also check out patreon.com/wellforpearls. If you're new to the show and you're new to this space, this is not a typical format to the show. Usually we do a live stream, but this weekend is Canadian Thanksgiving and we are camping. I am joining you in the live chat, which unfortunately, because it's a premiere, that chat doesn't continue to play after the fact, but I hope that you enjoy the show regardless. To Patreon subscribers of the show and who support the community, thank you so much for your ongoing patronage and for being here week in, week out. I hope that you enjoy the show today and I hope that you enjoy this time together as a community. We always have a really good time and I just really appreciate you checking out the show and being here. In today's show, we've got a little bit of housekeeping at the beginning, but nothing really major. And I've got lots of knitting to tell you about. I've got some spin together spinning that I've been doing this week. Spin together finishes today actually at noon, and I did get some spinning done and I'll talk about some of that spinning next weekend that I actually was able to accomplish. I didn't get as much done as I had really hoped that I would be able to do, but we basically had a 5-day week crunched into 2 days because I worked one day and then the other 2 days we left and went camping. So it was kind of a weird week, and of course the kids were sick last week, so this idea of being really super productive and getting lots done, I've kind of been working on letting go of some of that and just, you know, we fall into this language of I have to get things done, I have to get things done, or I'm not really getting anything done. And it's like, well, what is it that I feel that I really have to get done? You know, my self-worth and my integrity as a person is certainly not measured by how productive I am or am not. It's the person that I present day in, day out, the person that I feel that I want to be, that I'm striving to be. It's all those things that I've been thinking about. My best friend and I went for a walk on Wednesday morning and we were talking about all of this, and she's the one that I had the bear encounter with because we were so deep in conversation that we completely lost track of where we were and we came face to face with a bear. That was back in the summer. And yeah, once again, we were deep in conversation about this idea of productivity and how we define our worth. And yeah, I think it's important for us to remember that our worth is not necessarily that of how much we get done. You know, so what, the laundry didn't get done. It will get done at some point. So I hope that you're being kind to yourself and that you're speaking to yourself in a kind way, because I know sometimes we're really hard on ourselves and we really are our own worst critics, aren't we? So without further ado, let's get into the show, and I'm going to share with you my knitting this week because I've done a lot of waiting this week, you know, being at tutoring and soccer and being in transit, and I can get a lot done in a very short period of time. So then I feel productive and I'm right back to square one all over again. So without further ado, let's get into the show. So it's funny how things happen because I was having just an inordinate number of audio issues earlier this week and I just could not get anything to work no matter what I did. And I lost a lot of video as a result, and I tried to do some voiceovers and whatnot, but nothing really worked. And I was feeling really frustrated and I ended up just turning everything off and walking away. And I sat at my wheel for a while and I spun, but then even that I walked away from. And I was having some issues with Zoom, and it was really humbling where we spend our time and the amount of time that we spend trying to get the technology in our life to work and to work for us and to do what we want it to do. And I remembered that I really needed some quiet and needed some time to just sit and reflect and really be alone with my thoughts. And I ended up watching a movie at one point when I was spinning away. It was a very much needed quiet. I'd had a really challenging shift at work on Monday and some challenging ethics issues, and I just thought, you know, Sometimes we just need some quiet. So the show this week is very knitting heavy because I was actually just sitting and knitting and working on some quiet things. So let's talk about that stuff first. If you are wondering about the things that happen in our community and the things that you might want to get involved with, please check out the show notes. They are available at patreon.com/wellforpearls under episode 171, as well as at wellforpearls.com episode 171, and they are linked below here on YouTube. So I'm going to talk this week about some spinning that I did get done. I was working on my CVM that my friend Greta and I had processed at Liz's mill, Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works. I'm spinning this long draw on my Lendrum Saxony, so we'll talk about that a little bit. I also started spinning some Cormo that I also had processed by Liz, and I really have been enjoying that quite surprisingly. I wasn't really sure. Spinning the finer wools is not my favorite thing, and I was sort of wondering if I would enjoy it as much as I was hoping, and I've been really pleasantly surprised. I put the Magicraft on my fastest ratio, and I've just been spinning away, and it's been really, really lovely. So I'll share a little bit about that with you. Yesterday in the Wool Circle, yesterday morning, which is a live stream for patrons of the community, we just look for the Wool Circle on Patreon if you would like to join that. It's a bi-weekly live stream that we do, and we spend time actually on my wheels looking at how I actually spin in real time, and we talk about some of the things I'm working on in the background. And I was talking about the Cormo and some of the background around Cormo, and we were talking and I was talking about spinning this stuff, and I had originally tried to spin it a little bit thicker, and it was fun. It's interesting sometimes how, we talk about spinning intuitively and default spinning, and we talk about, learning to spin the fiber the way that it wants to be spun versus how we want to spin, and we go back and forth with all these discussions in the spinning community. And when you look at the fiber characteristics, sometimes it just comes down to that is the way that the fiber wants to be spun. It wants a certain amount of twist, it wants to be handled a certain way, and the Cormo, instead of trying to spin it a bit thicker, once I went to spinning it finer with more twist, it just really started to come together for me. So we'll talk about that a little bit. If you're interested in joining book club, our Tin Can Knits Along, if you're interested in any of the books that I've written, everything is linked down below. There's also a monthly newsletter. Our monthly newsletter will be going out sometime next week. You can sign up for that at wellforpearls.com, and it just keeps you up to date with what's going on this month in the community, gives you some links, and then you can learn more. So in terms of my knitting this week, let's talk about my knitting first. I have been working on my Albini cardigan. I've also been working on a new cast on that I completely cast on a whim because I just needed something mindless to do. And I've also been working on my Tunic cardigan, which is a pattern out of Vogue Knitting from a number of years ago. It was something that had been in my queue and in my sort of stashed patterns for quite a long time, and I finally just decided to cast it on because I really wanted something to work on. So my love note is behind me on my Diana. It's over here. I still haven't had a chance to lengthen the hem on it yet. I am hoping that I can work on that this weekend and get that done. So hopefully I'll have a finished object to share with you next week. In terms of my Albini, so my Albini it's a pattern by Orlane Sucche. She is at Tete Blanche. I can't remember what her Instagram username is, but I will hopefully include it in the show notes if I remember. So this is a pattern by Orlane Sucche. It's a really, really classic raglan cardigan. It has a round neck with a lovely collar. You work your stitches down. You build, instead of doing short row shaping in the yoke, you actually build the neck as you knit, and then eventually you have enough stitches that you start to work your way down. I'm doing this out of a 3-ply Shetland that I have been spinning. I've been spinning, knitting, which of course I always say don't do, but in this case I just don't want to have a whole bunch of this yardage in my stash. I just want to have what I need for the sweater, and then the remaining fiber I can pay it forward and pass on to you guys. I also have been working on a 2-ply that I would like to use for another, a hat or a shawl, something that I've kind of been hanging onto that shawl, onto that yarn for a shawl that I've talked about on the podcast before. I just honestly haven't had time to cast it on. That is the honest truth. So I was able to get gauge with this on, so I'm knitting it on 4mm needles, the main fabric. And my gauge is a little bit different from the pattern. So I ended up knitting, I think it's the smallest size, but with the goal and the intention of getting the neck size up. And so, because my gauge is a little bit bigger from the pattern itself, so it actually, I've tried it on a couple of times. I think it's working out okay. I knit the torso a little bit longer. So when I got to the side shaping that you do in the pattern, as I was working my way down the body, when I finished the side decreases, when you get to a certain length from the underarm to the end of the shaping, you cast off a bunch of stitches on either side to create the front pockets. And what I ended up doing was adding an extra inch of knitting to make the body longer. And then I knit the body even a little bit longer than what was called for in the pattern. I think I ended up adding about 3 inches to the body of the cardigan because I just wanted a longer cardigan. I think the finished cardigan in the pattern is about, for my size, I think it was 13.5 inches long from underarm. And I really don't like my cardigans to be less than about 15 inches. I really like them to be a little bit longer. So the intention here was to make it about 16 inches long. I've talked about how long my torso is in previous episodes. And so to compensate for that additional 4 inches in my torso, I tend to add 3 to 4 inches when I knit most cardigans, which I've talked about before. So this was no exception. So when I got to the length that I wanted, which was 14 inches from underarm to the bottom hem, I had an opportunity to start the braid that goes across the bottom before you do the bottom ribbing. And I've really enjoyed that detail. You go down to your smaller needles that you use for your ribbing, and just the detail of having that braid along the bottom before you start the ribbing, it's just lovely. These are the little nuanced details in knitwear patterns that really endear me to them. When there's those little things about the pattern that just takes it to the next level. So it might be a very classic, very simple pattern in some ways, but there's those little things that are thrown in that are just lovely. And that's one of them. So I'm halfway through the braid at this point, and I'm just about ready to start the ribbing. The back of this cardigan is really interesting because the ribbing is actually done on 1/2 for a split ribbing, so that the back center, there's literally a split. And I'm looking forward to finishing that. I think from this skein, this last skein that I finished, I think I'll actually be able to eke out the rest of the body and completely finish off the ribbing. And I might even have enough to pick up both button bands and finish those. I don't want to say that I'll have enough to do the collar as well. That I feel like that's probably a bit too much. I maybe don't have that much yardage left, but then I'll be able to do one last big monster skein to knit both of the sleeves. So that's sort of what I'm working towards now and working towards finishing. There's a whole bunch of distractions out to my right-hand side here because out the window are the garbage guys. They're just playing around with my neighbor's recycling bins. I'm not really sure why. I wonder if she put something in that they need to leave a note. So I was just sort of interested because he's moving them around and moving them around. It's very odd. Anyways, that's why I keep looking over to my right-hand side. So that is my Albini by Orlane Sucche, and I'm excited to have this finished. I'm also really excited to spin a little bit more of this Shetland, and that is something that I'm going to work on this week, and hopefully I'll be able to finish the sleeves within the next couple of weeks and have that cast off as the weather gets cooler. I was wearing a sweater this morning on my walk, and I was actually wearing my Williametti. I don't actually know exactly how to say that, but my Williametti, anyways, it's a pattern by Amy Christoffers, and I will try to remember to insert a photo here of that cardigan. It's still to this date one of my favorite things that I've ever made. And I'll just have a look. Actually, I'm not exactly sure when I made it. maybe if I check really quickly, I can tell you. I knit it in 2011, which is actually the same year that I knit my Opus Spicatum toque, which I'll talk about next, which I also shared some colorwork knitting with you yesterday on the Wool Circle. So let's talk about my Opus Spicatum next. So this is was a toque that I cast on for no other reason other than that I wanted to work on something and to replace my other one that I think I lost last year. I have gone through all the things to try to find this toque. I knit it in 2011. I looked it up after I recorded the Wool Circle yesterday because I kept saying that it was 10 years old, and I was like, it must be 10 years old. And I was right. It is 9 years old. So it's basically 10 years old. This is a pattern by Gagnon Osborn, and it's a great chevron pattern that works its way up into these wonderful crown decreases that actually preserve the integrity of the chevrons as you work your way into the crown, which I think is just awesome. My original one that I am knitting to replace, I used Malabrigo worsted singles, and I also used some old school Mad Tosh. I do have a little bit of that yarn left in my stash. I'm not sure I have enough to knit the toque again, which is a big bummer because I love this toque and I wore it pretty much exclusively. Like, I've knit other toques and I wear other toques, but this one is the one that I carry with me. I would wear it all the time. And I'm just really bummed that it might be gone. So I pulled out, I've been working on bulky weight yarn for my 51 yarns. It's one of the last yarns that I was needing to make. And so I was working on some Shetland, 2-ply bulky weight Shetland, and it came out a heavy Aran. And so I decided to go through my stash and see if I could find some other yarns that I had made that were on the bulkier side. And I stumbled on this yarn it was a BFL silk from West Coast Color that I had spun in 2016 because James had actually requested some mittens. They ended up felting, they ended up going through the ringer, they went through the wars, they were absolutely destroyed by the time we were done with them. I think they're gone. I'm not totally sure that I hung on to them because by the time he was done with them, they looked like they had, like I said, been through the wars. But he loved them and he wore them and wore them and wore them and wore them. And that really, at the end of the day, when you've spent about half an hour knitting something, probably more like an hour and a half, but still, when you've knit toddler mitts and your toddler actually wears them and loves them and wants to wear them all the time, that's a win. So this was the leftovers from that skein of yarn, and it's a Aran weight. It was about 7 to 8 wraps per inch. And the toque is actually knit on 5.5 millimeter or US size 9 needles, which is absolutely perfect for this yarn. And out of my stash, I pulled West Yorkshire Spinners Ire Valley DK, which was the yarn that I used for my Radiate pullover by Joji Locatelli, which I had knit back in, I think I knit that in 2018. Oh, I started it in 2018, but I cast it off on January 3rd, 2019. So almost 2 years ago, but I've actually worn it quite a bit. It ended up in my sort of knitted hand knit sweater kind of drawer in my dresser for quite a long time, and I didn't wear it right away because actually I do find it quite warm. But the last winter, when we were home and doing home learning and whatnot in the spring, we had some really cool days where we were able to be outside and it was sunny, but it was just cool. And I ended up wearing it quite a bit. I don't love the neck on it. I find it's actually quite high and it almost kind of bubbles a little bit. And I sort of wish that I had cast on with a wider neck and then added the neck afterwards, like sort of reverse engineered it a little bit. I have thought about pulling it out and reknitting it, but I haven't sort of gotten that far yet. And I'm not sure that I would reknit it if I pulled it out. So I'm not sure what to do. It's one of those patterns that's so wearable and so easy, and it's got that round yoke, but I'm not sure that if I were to reknit it that I would necessarily wear it any more than I wear it now. But then that neck is really annoying. So I'm not sure. I'm just thinking out loud. Sometimes it's worth it to rip things out and sometimes it's not. This is one of those things that I'm a little bit torn about whether or not I should or not. So I cast on this toque, and we talked about how I knit color work yesterday in the wool circle. And I showed you sort of how I hold my yarns. I knit continental and I knit English when I'm doing color work. This pattern is very intuitive. I don't need to look at the chart while I'm knitting it. It's very, if you know how to read your knitting and you can figure out where, based on the row below, where you are in the pattern, it's really, really intuitive. And once you have 5 of the chevron points, of sort of the diamonds that the chevron makes, you know that you're ready to start your crown decreases. And then from there, I have the chart in front of me and I just have it up on my phone. It's such an easy chart to read that you don't really need much more than that. And you start to slip the marker, but again, it's easy peasy lemon squeezy. I had thought with my original one about maybe putting a palm on it, one of the faux fur ones, or maybe a handmade one. But you know, it's funny because the crown decreases are so brilliant and they're so well mapped out and they look so nice when they're finished. This is one of those toques that I kind of don't want a palm on. So I probably won't put a palm on this one either. So that is my Opus Spicatum that was sort of a on a whim cast on, and I'm glad that I am working on it. I'm glad that it's worked out. The third project that I've been working on is actually my Tunic cardigan. So this is a pattern out of Vogue Knitting from the 25-year anniversary issue. And again, I think this was from 2011, but I might be wrong. This is a lovely mosaic knitting pattern. We've talked about this pattern on the podcast before when I first cast this on, and I've actually continued to work up. Basically, the mosaic pattern is worked over 20 rows, and I've just continued to work on it when I can, but I've been trying to get a full 20 rows done when I sit down to work on this. And mostly it's just so that I can keep track of where I am in the pattern, but also because it's completely and totally addictive. It's just lovely. I don't feel like I'm making really fast progress because there's something to do on every single row, and every single row is different. But on the other hand, it's really, really enjoyable. And so as you're working the mosaic and as you're kind of working the stitches, it's really kind of fun to see like what's next. So, you know, the one row you're slipping one front, one back slip, you know, and and then the next row you're slipping a whole bunch and doing a yarn over. Like it's a really cool pattern. And then you have some breaks where you knit and purl and you're working those colors sort of back and forth as you go. So I'm using Juniper Moon Farms and the smoked colorway and the sand colorway in their, I think it's their Patagonia Organic Merino. This is commercial yarn and I'm just really enjoying it. I ended up getting gauge on 4mm or US size 7 needles, and the pattern actually calls for 4.5mm needles, but I was finding that the 4.5 just gave, the fabric was just a little bit too open, a little bit too much, the hand of it was just too loose, whereas on the 4mm needles, I was closer to gauge and it also gave me a nicer fabric. So again, I've cast on the smallest size for this because the sizing is, you're meant to wear this with quite a lot of ease. So I think the smallest size is like 37-inch bust or something like that. So with my slight differences in gauge and having a little bit bigger of a gauge, even though I'm on a smaller needle, it'll give me enough ease that I can knit this to the length that I want it, but also with the ease that I want it. In the photo, it's worn on somebody who, she's not curvy, the model, and it's worn just sort of in a like straight sort of coat-ish over top of a tunic length dress with some leggings. It's a really cute pattern. And I can see myself wearing it that way, wearing it open over a pair of jeans with a t-shirt like what I'm wearing now. I think it's just, there's a lot of applications where, like today is a great example where I was walking with my friend Amber, and halfway through the walk, we're both like pulling off our sweaters, she was wearing a jacket. We were both pulling them off and looping them through our the straps on our bags because like it's just too warm, but it was kind of too cold just to be in a t-shirt. So you know, our shoulder seasons here are cool enough for something, but not warm enough for other things. So I think something like this will be really nice. And I am gonna make it again a little bit longer than what the pattern calls for, and knit it more to the length that I would like it for the clothing that I want to wear it with. So the fabric has a nice drape. It's got a nice hand to it. The tweed is working up really nicely. It's kind of what I was hoping for. A pattern like this though, I could totally see the sand colorway, the lighter color in this. The more I knit on it, the more I'm like, I want to knit this in hand spun. I want to do like a cream or gray, like the smoked colorway, or maybe a black to set off a hand spun yarn in the background. It would just be awesome. So if you're dreaming about a new project, definitely check out this one. So that's my Tunic cardigan. It's not been super fast. I'm hoping that with all the driving that we did yesterday and the drive that we have again on Monday, or not yesterday, but the day before on Thursday, I'm hoping that between those two drives, I'm hoping that I can get at least a little bit of inches going on this. That's my hope anyhow. So fingers crossed that I've got a little bit more distance. The ribbing, I am working on 3.75 millimeter or US size 5 needles. And it is, you do change your stitch count. So you cast on and cast off, and you do make ones and you do decreases to increase and decrease your stitches, so that working your way up, you don't have a lot of pull in where the ribbing is. It maintains a straight edge. And I think that shaping is actually quite nice. We'll see what it looks like when it's finished. I am a little bit worried about sort of having to just trust the process with a garment like this. It's not like you can try it on a ton. It's not like you really know what it's going to look like when it's washed and blocked. The front ribbing is quite large. I think it's like 5 inches is the ribbing. So there's a lot of just sort of trusting the process with a garment like this. And I'm just really hoping that it's something that I've wanted to knit for so long and make for so long, and I bought the yarn for this project, and I'm just sort of hoping that all will be well. So that is that project. The last project that I wanted to talk about is my love note's not done yet, so maybe we should just talk about it when it's done next week, because I just have to add that little bit to the bottom hem, and I'm hoping that I get that done on our drive, or maybe when we're sitting around the campfire or something. So maybe we'll kind of leave that for next week. My spins in progress have been for Spin Together this week. So I had started my West Coast color Karma, which was a Merino yak blend, 50-50. It's very much spinning like yak. I'm using a very short draw, holding the fiber very, very loosely. We had included some video last time on sort of what that looked like. I'm spinning this on my Lendrum Saxony and double drive on about 8:1. Although I have upped the ratio, I'm up to 18:1 spinning my CVM for long draw, just to get that twist in there a little bit faster. And I might actually leave it on that and go back to the Merino yak and just sort of see how it spins when I go back to this after I'm finished the CVM. So I'm spinning the CVM for Spin Together. So Spin Together is a week-long spinning event. It's hosted out of the UK, and I'm spinning with Team Sweet Georgia. If you guys would like to do Spin Together as a community next year, please let me know, and I will sort of get the ball rolling earlier. I just kind of ran out of time this year. It's not like we all haven't been coping with so much this year. So I've been spinning away with them. I need to submit my yardage after we're done here. I'm actually going to submit my, or finish up my spinning, and then I'll be able to count up my yardage and get that submitted to Leah, our team captain. And Leah was actually on Woolen Spinning Radio this month. So for those who are part of the Patreon community, part of joining the Patreon community is getting the audio podcast of Woolen Spinning Radio. And Leah was actually on Woolen Spinning Radio, which is really fun. So we had a spin in together this past week, and we were all just spinning together, and I've been working on my CVM. So this is on my Lendrum Saxony and double drive on 18:1, and I've been just spinning the roving long backwards draw. I took the roving and I actually have been splitting it a little bit just to give myself a little bit less to work with. I had done a ply back test and sort of looked at what the 2-ply might look like in this sort of very woolen, very rustic yarn. it was very fine. It would have, if I leave it as a 2-ply, it will knit up as a very light fingering, and I would like a sport weight. I'm kind of looking to knit the, what's it called? Little Love by Anka's Trick. I'll link it in the show notes, and it calls for a light fingering, but I think if I swatch for this, I could maybe make it work. It's 3.25 millimeter needles. I'm just really torn about knitting with something lower than about a 3.5 or 3.75 millimeter needle for like an entire sweater. But I'll do some swatching and I'll see. But my plan at this point on Wednesday when I'm recording this is to 3-ply this. I need quite a lot of yardage if I am going to make this sweater. I think it calls for, and it's also meant to be worn with quite a lot of positive ease. So if I make the 41-inch bust, which would give me it would give me the recommended amount of ease, I still need about 1,300 yards of yarn. So I'll keep spinning this up. I have the entire fleece to spin. It's not like I don't have enough fiber. It's more just whether or not I want to spin that much. And I think probably what I would do is I would add some length to it anyways. I don't want to make the version of this cardigan that's called the Big Love, so that one is quite a bit longer and it's kind of more like a jacket. I'm not sure if so the Little Love is the fingering weight version, and I think Big Love is a bulky, it's an Aran weight. It's the same length, but it's just a thicker gauge, whereas the Little Love is the fingering weight version. So it's kind of like the Weekender. There's the fingering version, and then there's the worsted version. Same with Boxy by Joji Locatelli. There's the worsted weight and the fingering weight version. So this is the fingering weight version, and it's called Little Love. And but like I said, it's a significant amount of yardage. However, knitting it longer and using up all of the yarn would be a great way to go. So I've included a little bit of video here of me spinning this fiber. It's pin drafted roving. It was from a fleece that we had processed that Megan, Likey Meg, in the community had helped us to get organized. We sent it up to, me and my friend Greta locally, we sent it up to Liz at Kingdom Fleece and Fiber Works, and she made it into pin drafted roving for us, because we had bought from Galen 2 fleeces. So we ended up with a light gray and sort of a tawny light brown. This is the light brown one of the 2, and then the other one is a little bit more gray. We had it pin drafted by Liz. I just felt at the time that I didn't have a lot of resources with everything going on in 2020 to also process a fleece. So we asked Liz to do it for us. She's done a beautiful job. It's just spinning like butter. And yeah, I'm excited to get this plied and to see what it looks like. So to ply this yarn, what I did was I got the 3 bobbins spun before we left. I was hoping to do 6, but I only got 3 done. It's kind of just the way this week has gone. Got 3 done, and then I will ply them up on my e-spinner while we're here, because we actually have an electrical site and we're plugged in. So the trailer is actually plugged in, and I can plug in my e-spinner into the trailer and I can spin away. I don't even have to use my battery pack. So I've been plying this up while we're here. I brought my skein winder to do yardage, and that's been working really well. So that's my CVM. My Cormo is going really well. Again, Liz pin drafted this for me. It was something that was in my stash for quite a long time. We talked about it quite a bit yesterday morning on the Wool Circle. So if you're interested in learning more, please check that out if you're part of that on Patreon. But basically, this was a fleece that sat in my stash for too long and got quite cold. And the lanolin got really crunchy, and I wasn't sure that it was salvageable. Anyways, Liz did a beautiful job. And this is a little bit of video of me spinning this on my Magicraft Suzy Pro. I put it on the highest ratio at 28:1, and it's just spinning up like butter. Lots and lots of twist. My plyback tests have been very tight, and again, this is probably going to be around 3-ply. I'm with the poof factor and just the crimp that is present in Cormo, and just the elasticity of this fiber, I'm expecting it to bloom to a heavy sport like DK if I do a 3-ply. So I've been looking at a couple of things in my queue that I would like to make, and I've actually based on my gauge and based on sort of what comes out, I've been looking at a couple of patterns that I've sort of been keeping my eye on for a bit. One of them is actually the Cathedral pullover by Unit Toronto, and the Estrella pullover by Unit Toronto as well. These are both, one is a worsted weight and one is a sport weight. So depending, in the sport weight, you can knit it in sport or a DK yarn, sort of a 11 to 12 wraps per inch kind of thing. And the other one, the Cathedral, it's Cathedral or Catral, I'm not exactly sure how to say it. That one's a worsted weight, so 9 wraps per inch. So sort of depending on how the Cormo swatches and after it's washed and blocked, sorry, not blocked, after it's washed and I've knitted into a swatch, I'll see kind of where my stitch gauge sort of ends up, and then I'll decide which of the two I would like to make. I think either would work really well for a 3-ply. They both have a little bit of stitch definition. They both have sort of a lacy kind of patterning in the, one of them is in the yoke and the other one is in the full body. So I'll link those in the show notes so you can have a look at those. But one of those two patterns, I think I'll do the Cormo in. The other thing that I was thinking about was if I have some leftover fiber from the CVM spin, I'm going to put it aside and start a collection of natural colored yarns that I've spun and knit at the sport weight sort of weight, if you will, because I have my eye on a couple of sweaters that are colorwork sweaters that in natural colored fleece would look amazing knit up. And so I'm going to just start putting aside some yardage to do a pullover that would feature only naturally colored fleeces. And this was an idea that I saw several people on Instagram doing, and I thought what an awesome way to feature some different natural colored fiber and natural colored wool, basically. So that's what I've been spinning, and not to kind of blitz through it, but I think what we'll do is next week when some of these yarns are actually done, we'll sit and talk about them a little bit more, and I'll show you the knit swatches, and we'll talk about how I ended up sort of spinning them in terms of, like, you know, getting yardage and spinning sort of a little bit quicker and wanting to sort of amass yardage versus a spin like the Merino yak that's quite slow. I've only got one bobbin of 3 done for that one, and it's definitely taking its time. That yarn I'm almost positive is going to be for a shawl. So I would like to put it with something, or if I have enough yardage, it might actually be the yoke of a colorwork sweater. I was looking at another Orlane Sucche pattern called Dubula. I'm not exactly sure how to say it. D-U-B-U-L-A. I'll link it in the show notes. It's a worsted weight, but it has this gorgeous colorwork yoke, and then a very a solid color behind. So I was thinking about maybe using it as a yoke of a sweater. I don't need any more sweaters, but I love knitting sweaters and I do wear them. So we will see. So let's talk about some community participation, and that'll round out the show. So for our community participation this week, I wanted to extend the invitation to comment below or to join in on the Ravelry group and comment in the episode thread. Tell us about your spinning plans for the rest of the year. What are you looking forward to learning, exploring, and making? So this goes with some of our stuff up and coming around spinning blends, spinning luxury fibers, just sort of pushing our spinning to the extreme. What is it that you're going to work on for the rest of the year? So comment below in the YouTube video or comment in the episode thread for October in the Ravelry group. It is linked in the show notes, and tell us about what you're going to do. And I will send out some fiber after the first show in November when I do the random draw, and I'll figure out how to sort of bring all of those comments and all of that together so that I can do a giveaway. So for our Tin Can Knits Along, use the hashtag Tin Can Knits Along. We're just looking in our stash, looking at our spinning, looking at our fiber, and trying to figure out what we are going to make. This is a make along in our community that'll run sort of through till the end of the year, maybe into the new year, depending on who's working on what. I'm working on my love note for this, and the reason why we chose Tin Can Knits was just because I started talking about the love note and other people wanted to join in. So I wanted to share with you Sarah's project here, not Snaz. Not Zaz. I'm not exactly sure how to say it, Sarah. I'm sorry. I probably completely butchered it, but this is something that she's making for her sister. So she had her whip. It's in commercial yarn, and she is going to knit it up and finish it up for her sister. And she's hoping that participating in the Tin Can Knits along with us will kind of give her a kick up the backside to get it done. So I hope that you get it done, Sarah. And beautiful knitting, gorgeous color, gorgeous color. And I hope your sister loves her sweater. So thank you for sharing, Sarah. We have breed and color studies going in the group and in the community from till the end of the year. We are looking at Charolais, and it is Katrina drew the inspiration from a photo that Greta at the Warmest Row shared in our Ravelry group for our ongoing inspiration for photography for the breed and color studies. So me and Katrina are in the process of chit-chatting about our next study, which will start at the beginning of January. But in the meantime, we've been looking at this gorgeous Charolais bat that Katrina made for this particular study, and people have been spinning it up in so many different ways. Last week I shared with you a pillow that Megan had spun and woven, and this week I've got Barb's gorgeous crepe yarn. Finished my yarn after so much plying, made a bubble crepe for the first time, used 6 singles, 2 with a Charolais with some Shswap Schreier I have in my stash. Every ply was up-plied, couldn't see the final results until the finishing bath. Bulky weight at 6 wraps per inch. She's knit a cowl. Pictures to come once she's wet, finished, and woven in the ends. It was fun, but looking forward to regular plying for a break. Gorgeous, gorgeous spinning there, Barb, and what an interesting yarn. I just love to see what people do with this stuff, and I'm excited to see Barb's cowl, and hopefully she'll take some photos and I can share it on the podcast next week as a bit of a follow-up, because I'm sure you are wondering, like myself, how that yarn knit up, because it is so interesting to me how some of these textured yarns, like crepe yarns, how they work up. So thank you, Barb, for sharing. The last thing I wanted to share with you was Jackie's Zero to Hero. This is an incredible project. So Zero to Hero is something that we do every year. It kind of goes into the next year. So if you don't get your project done in 1 year, do not worry about it. Use the hashtag Zero to Hero. And for 2020, people have been sharing what they've done. So the idea is to go from fiber to yarn to finished project. So you don't have to do the fiber prep, but you do need to go from fiber to spinning to yarn to a finished project. So some people weave, some people knit. A lot of people knit. I think there are a lot of knitters in our community. And this 3-ply targi that Jackie did is just unbelievable. You can see in this photo how much spinning there is. And she knit up this absolutely beautiful sweater called Bird Song, which I have linked in the show notes for you. So Jackie says, I'm so excited about my Zero to Hero project. She bought 2 pounds of targi at Oregon at Oregon Flock and Fiber in September of 2018. She started spinning it up in January of 2020, and she spun a worsted short forward draw in her default 45 wraps per inch singles. She finished off with 3,300 yards of 3-ply fingering, and she decided to dye 1 hank using abundant earth wool tinctures and chose Bird Song to knit. She's glad she went up a size because her gauge swatch lied and the sleeves are a little bit too long, but she doesn't mind. It looks amazing, Jackie. Honestly, the yarn is so cozy and the sweater is so lovely and soft. Beautiful, Jackie. Absolutely gorgeous. I wish I could touch it in real life. You just amazing knitting, amazing spinning, and really well done. I'm glad that you shared it with us. Thank you so much. So that is it for this week. I hope that you enjoyed this slightly different layout, this slightly different podcast. Thank you so much for joining us in the YouTube premiere this week. I hope that you really enjoyed it. If you are not a patron of the show and you were able to join the premiere, this is kind of what the live stream is like every week. Everybody chit-chatting in the live chat and sharing their projects, spinning and knitting along and sipping coffee as we live stream. So I hope that you will consider coming over and joining us. We have a lot of fun. There's a lot of support and a lot of just general camaraderie and kindness to one another. In the meantime, I'm getting ready to release our How I Spin content next month, which will be exploring blends for the rest of the year. If you're interested in the How I Spin content, please check out the co-executive producers on Patreon. And I hope that you'll consider joining us for that. And that also gives you access to the Slack channel, which is incredibly busy. I know sometimes when people are feeling overwhelmed by the number and amount of messages that they sort of just don't even know where to jump in. Honestly, just jump in. If you've got a question and you're sort of feeling badly about posting it because there's a whole bunch of other stuff going on and other chitter chatter, just post it. People will respond to you within a minute because somebody in a time zone somewhere is looking at the Slack chat and trying to catch up. So do just jump in with your questions and people will be there to support you. It's really, really amazing. So if you're interested in a community of like-minded people who are open to wanting to spin and learn and inspire one another and grounded in kindness, openness, and welcoming, please think about coming over and joining us. I'm going to get back to camping. We are going to go probably for a walk or down to the beach or something. And in the meantime, happy spinning, happy knitting. I hope you had a great week if you were spinning as a part of a team for Spin Together, or if you're just spinning on the sidelines and enjoying that time. I hope you had a great week. Have a wonderful Thanksgiving if you are up here in Canada and celebrating. And I hope you're surrounded by family, even though we've kind of lost Thanksgiving in an effort to get Christmas back in terms of social gatherings and whatnot. But I hope that whatever your Thanksgiving has looked like has been at least relaxing and surrounded by loved ones anyways. Until next time, happy spinning. Bye, everyone.